Imagine you spend like weeks hand carving this beautiful, intricate wooden clock. You source the perfect timber, you meticulously measure all the gear ratios.
You're pouring your heart into every little spring and dial.
Exactly. It's this grueling, totally messy process. And then someone just walks into your workshop with a 3D printer, pushes a single button, and, I don't know, 3 seconds later, out pops the exact same clock. Perfect, polished, totally identical.
Right, which immediately forces you to ask a pretty tough question. What was the point of all that carving?
Yeah.
I mean, are we valuing the final clock sitting there on the shelf, or are we valuing the actual human skill it takes to build one?
And that tension right there is the existential crisis currently ripping through higher education. Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so glad you're here with us. Today, we are taking you straight into the heart of this problem.
It's a huge issue right now.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at a really fascinating presentation from a team at the UC Berkeley Center for Teaching and Learning.
Yeah, they've been running this massive project.
Right, funded by the California Education Learning Lab. And their whole goal is to figure out how to assess learning in the age of generative AI. Their literal mission is to move, quote, beyond the checklist of traditional grading rubrics.
Because, well, if a machine can instantly generate that perfect polished clock, or, in this context, the perfect college essay, then the old ways of measuring human knowledge are just completely broken.
They really are.
What's fascinating here is that the arrival of AI isn't just a technology problem. It is a deeply philosophical one. It challenges the fundamental goals of why we even go to school in the first place.
Yeah, totally.
And when you read through this Berkeley presentation, it exposes this massive, honestly, incredibly uncomfortable rift between what teachers think they are teaching and what students think they're actually doing to get the grade.
So, to figure out how to fix grading, the Berkeley team first had to find out where everyone's heads were at, right?
Right. They set up 14 focus groups.
With 44 total participants across the university, I think?
Yep, 44. And they made sure they had demographic diversity. So about 25% were first-generation or low-income students, along with solid representation from Hispanic and Latin identifying participants.
Which is so important to make sure the data actually reflects the reality of their campus.
Exactly. Though it is kind of funny, the team noted that the instructors were actually notably harder to recruit for these groups than the students were.
I can imagine. Teachers are busy. But so where do they even start with these groups?
Well, for a baseline, the researchers used the well-known AAC&U value rubrics.
The Association of American Colleges and Universities.
Right. These rubrics are basically the gold standard for how colleges define complex skills. The Berkeley team focused specifically on the rubrics for critical thinking and information literacy.
Okay.
They sat these groups down, showed them the rubrics, and essentially just asked, how do you view these skills in a world where AI exists?
We should probably explain what one of these value rubrics actually looks like. Because, the rubric defines critical thinking as this really complex, multi-layered habit of mind.
It's not just a checklist.
Exactly. It involves grappling with contradictory issues, showing awareness of your own bias, evaluating the context of the evidence, and then finally arriving at a meaningful conclusion.
But when the team asked the students about this...
Oh, the discoveries were shocking. The students had just completely flattened the concept.
Flattened is the perfect word for it. They turned this deeply cognitive process into a structural checklist.
Yeah. Like, when the students looked at the phrase arriving at a conclusion on the rubric, they didn't see it as the mental climax of this difficult intellectual journey.
No, they assumed it literally just meant writing a standard conclusion paragraph at the end of a paper. Restate the thesis, summarize the points, full stop.
Okay, but wait. I have to push back a little on the Berkeley team's shock here. Because, isn't that checklist entirely necessary? Well, if a student doesn't know how to structure a conclusion paragraph, or use proper grammar, or format their citations, are we kind of failing them? Like, if we stop grading them on the structural components of an essay, aren't we just lowering our standards and graduating people who can't even write a coherent sentence?
That is entirely fair. You are hitting on the exact friction point that educators are facing right now. Structure is important, yes. But what the focus groups revealed is that we have kind of mistaken the scaffolding for the building itself.
Okay, tell me more.
Think about using a GPS to navigate a new city. If you just blindly follow the glowing blue line on your phone, you will eventually get to your destination, right?
Right. You follow the structure perfectly.
Exactly. But if your phone dies halfway there, you have absolutely no mental map of where you are. You haven't actually learned to navigate. You've only learned to follow instructions.
Oh, wow.
And we have spent decades grading students on their ability to follow the blue line of an essay format. And so the student has completely internalized that the format is the thinking.
So they view the actual messy process of thinking as entirely separate from what actually gets graded.
Yes.
And if the grade is only based on that structural output, well, they are just going to find the most efficient way to generate that output.
Which leads right into another crucial disconnect the researchers uncovered. They asked the focus groups what tasks could be comfortably offloaded to a machine.
And both the students and the teachers actually agreed on this, right?
Yeah.
Things like summarizing long texts, explaining basic concepts, and looking up information.
Right. Which sounds totally reasonable on the surface.
Yeah, I mean, we offload tedious math to calculators all the time. Why not let a machine do the tedious baseline research?
Because the Berkeley University librarians raised a massive red flag here. They pointed out that students drastically lack AI literacy.
Oh, interesting.
Using a large language model, an LLM, is not actually retrieving information. It is fundamentally different from a search engine.
Right, because a search engine queries a database of actual existing human documents and ranks them.
Exactly. But an LLM just predicts text. It looks at the prompt you gave it, calculates the mathematical probability of what word should come next, and just generates a string of text that sounds statistically plausible.
It's essentially the world's most sophisticated autocomplete.
Yes. But students are treating generative AI exactly like a search engine. They are offloading the foundational step of research to a tool that isn't actually researching at all.
It is just predicting what a good research answer should sound like, which is exactly why it confidently hallucinates fake citations.
Precisely. The students think they are looking up facts, but they are actually just asking a machine to write a very convincing piece of historical fiction.
That is terrifying. But surely the focus groups found something that both students and teachers agreed was uniquely human.
They did, actually. Both groups felt that taking a personal position, having a distinct stance in the world, was a uniquely human trait that AI shouldn't handle.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Well, hold on. That agreement completely shatters the moment we look at how assignments are actually graded in the real world.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because instructors claim, up and down, that they want to hear a student's unique voice. They say they want to see them grapple with messy ideas and take a bold stance.
But in reality, what do they actually reward with an A grade?
Polish. Poise. Perfect sentence structure. A total lack of grammatical errors.
Right. It creates this impossible dilemma. The instructors say, give me your raw personal ideas. But the students feel deeply that they cannot put their own humanity or their controversial stances into their work.
Because they are terrified of being penalized for a lack of polish or academic perfection.
Exactly. They know that a bold, messy idea with 3 comma splices is going to get a lower grade than a safe, boring idea with perfect syntax.
So the students adapt. I mean, they write down their initial ideas, and then they run them through generative AI to check and sanitize their work. They actively strip out their own voice just to make sure it sounds, quote-unquote, professional enough to appease the rubric.
And the result is something that the students themselves are actually deeply unhappy with. The source explicitly highlights this. Students complain that AI-generated writing feels like it is lacking humanity or lacking a soul.
It's technically correct, but completely hollow. Yeah, it reminds me so much of the music industry right now.
Oh, how so?
Well, you have an artist who gets into the recording booth,
Sure.
right? And they sing this incredibly raw, emotional vocal take. Maybe her voice cracks a little on the high note because she's actually crying. It is beautiful and human.
Yeah.
But then the producer takes that track, runs it through heavy pitch correction, slaps a ton of auto-tune on it, and lines up every single syllable perfectly to the digital grid. The final track is technically flawless. Every note is perfectly on pitch. But it sounds completely dead and robotic. The soul is gone.
That is a perfect analogy. And the reason this happens in education is because our modern grading infrastructure demands that auto-tuned perfection. Traditional rubrics are built entirely around the final product. And the learning management system software like Canvas or Blackboard, which are used in almost every college, they literally hardwire this behavior into our brains.
Oh, the digital rubrics. The source spends a lot of time on this. An instructor opens a student's essay on their screen, and a little sidebar pops up They click a box that says grammar and mechanics, assign 2 out of 5 points, click another box for thesis clarity, and the software just spits out an 85%.
And the teacher feels like they've objectively justified the grade.
Yeah.
But the system is highly mechanized. It turns evaluating human thought into an accounting exercise. The entire messy, iterative process of learning the rough drafts, the wrong turns, the moments of utter confusion, it is all completely ignored.
Because the digital infrastructure is only designed to evaluate the final, polished output.
Exactly.
But since generative AI is now the ultimate producer of final polished outputs, grading the product is suddenly a dead end.
Right.
So the Berkeley team realized that if the final essay can be faked or auto-tuned by AI in 3 seconds, they needed to find a way to measure the messy, unfakeable process of learning itself.
Which led to a very ambitious redesign. The researchers decided to just throw feasibility out the window for a moment. They threw away the old rubrics entirely and wrote new ones from scratch.
Wow.
Yeah, they started adding all the messy human elements that never actually show up in a final paper.
Things like pivoting.
Yeah.
Or making serendipitous discoveries. Or iterative inquiry. I mean, let's say you are researching the history of the space race, right? And you spend 3 hours reading an incredibly dense article about rocket propulsion.
Right.
And then at 2 a.m. you realize, wait, this article actually doesn't support my thesis at all. The author's methodology is flawed. I need to throw these 3 pages of my draft in the trash.
Which hurts, but...
It hurts. But that realization requires deep, profound critical thinking.
But it leaves absolutely zero trace in the final essay. You delete the paragraph, you remove the citation, and the teacher never even knows you read it. So the Berkeley team created these massive detailed rubrics focused on that kind of discernment.
Yeah.
And then they took them into a pilot implementation phase.
And they specifically focused on humanities and social science courses. Right.
Yeah.
They avoided the massive 500-person STEM lectures just to keep the scope manageable for the pilot.
Yeah, that makes sense. And they asked the instructors to do 2 things. First, loosen the ban on AI. Allow students to use it to some extent in their brainstorming or drafting process.
Okay.
Second, pick criteria from these massive new process-based rubrics to grade the assignments.
And that is exactly where they hit a massive evaluation wall.
Oh, yeah.
The graduate readers who were hired to grade these papers were totally lost. They looked at the student's final essay, and then they looked at the rubric criteria for iterative inquiry, and basically said, I don't see this anywhere. Am I supposed to guess how many drafts they wrote?
They couldn't grade the process because they couldn't see the process.
I mean, how on earth do you grade invisible thoughts? If I make a brilliant decision to discard a bad source, and I hide that decision from my teacher by deleting it, how can they possibly grade me on it? You can't put a letter grade on something that doesn't exist on the page.
It is the central conundrum of assessing process. The Berkeley team realized that to make the invisible visible, you have to explicitly ask for it. Instructors had to build workarounds into the assignments themselves. They started requiring cover letters, metacognitive logs, or informal journals where students actually documented their intellectual journey.
A metacognitive log. So literally thinking about how you think. What does that actually look like in practice for a student?
It looks like a student writing a short, informal paragraph right alongside their formal essay that says, I originally wanted to argue that social media causes isolation. I asked ChatGPT to find sources for this, but when I actually read the sources the AI suggested, I realized they were outdated.
Oh, that's great.
So I had to completely pivot my thesis halfway through the week to focus on algorithmic echo chambers instead. It was frustrating, but I think my new argument is stronger.
Oh, wow. That is pure gold for a teacher. You could actually see the gears turning in their head.
Right. One of the graduate readers even noted that reading the essay alone left them confused about how to apply the new rubric. But when they read the student's cover letter alongside the essay, it completely unlocked their understanding of the paper.
They could suddenly grade the human effort.
Exactly. Without explicitly asking the student to document their process, the process simply cannot be graded.
It's like requiring a math student to show their work on a calculus test, but applied to writing a philosophy paper.
That's a great way to put it.
But here's the thing. Even if you require a cover letter, measuring the process doesn't solve the deeper underlying issue here.
No, it really doesn't. We have to ask why students are rushing to use AI to bypass the learning process in the first place.
Right. And the source is very clear that it's not just because students are lazy. The stereotype of the lazy college student using ChatGPT so they can go out to a party is largely a myth.
The focus groups highlighted that students today are incredibly overcommitted. They are caregiving for family members, they are working part-time or even full-time jobs just to afford tuition. They are taking massive course loads.
They simply lack time.
Yes. But more importantly, the team sense that these highly schooled students are completely disillusioned with the work they're being asked to do.
They view traditional assignments like the classic read-a-response paper as a totally meaningless waste of time. They are just jumping through a hoop because a professor said so.
And if you give me a hoop to jump through, and I know that jumping through it won't actually help me in the real world.
Of course I'm going to hire a robot to jump through it for me. I need to go to my shift at work.
Exactly. The solution isn't just building better AI detectors, it's making the work matter. The instructors who saw the most success in the pilot were the ones who created assignments with real stakes.
Giving the work an audience beyond just the professor who gives it a grade.
Right. Instead of a generic essay on political science, one instructor had students draft a real letter to a congressperson, strongly encouraging them to actually send it to their representative's office.
That's awesome.
Or creating a multimedia project that a student could proudly put on a LinkedIn portfolio to help them get a job after graduation.
But doing that requires fighting against the very structure of the university itself. The presentation brought up a brilliant point about the arbitrary legacy compartments of college departments.
Oh, silos.
Yes. The structure of higher education is built around these historical silos. Philosophy is in one building, biology is across campus, English is in another.
And we force students to take these siloed general education requirements that they have zero interest in. You have an engineering student sitting in a 19th century literature class, staring at the clock, wondering how this helps them build bridges.
But students don't live their lives in those compartments. Real-world problems aren't siloed. Climate change isn't just a biology problem. It's an economics problem, a political science problem, and a communications problem.
One of the presenters shared an incredible anecdote about how to break these silos down. They were teaching a basic freshman reading and writing requirement at Stanford.
Which is typically a class students absolutely dread.
Right. So to get pragmatic, STEM-focused students in the door, they put a veneer of cancer biology over the entire course.
They used a topic the students actually cared about to teach the skills the students needed.
The students signed up thinking, great, a STEM class, we are going to learn about cellular mutation. And the instructor basically said, cool, we are going to talk about cancer biology all day, but we are going to do it by reading and writing about environmental injustice.
Wow.
We are going to look at how disproportionate pollutant exposure in low-income neighborhoods leads to higher cancer rates.
They took a sterile writing requirement and hooked them with real-world relevance. That's brilliant.
But this raises a profound question about the modern value proposition of a college degree. There is a massive disconnect between how faculty view education and how the public views it.
Definitely.
Faculty generally see their work as a transformational experience. They want to shape how a student thinks, how they evaluate evidence, how they see the world.
But the public and the government, they increasingly view college as a pure transaction. I pay you tuition, you give me a credential that gets me a higher salary.
The presentation specifically mentions how accreditation bodies, like WASC, evaluate universities, and accreditation is life or death for a college. If you lose it, your students can't get federal financial aid, and the school shuts down.
And WASC literally uses an ROI dashboard, a return on investment dashboard. They evaluate institutions based on the debt-to-income ratios of their graduates.
How much did this degree cost, and how much will I make 5 years after graduation?
If that is the only metric that matters to the people holding the purse strings, AI is going to eat the university system alive because the ROI of generative AI is infinity.
There was a staggering anecdote shared during the Q&A portion of the Berkeley presentation that proves this exactly. One of the participants went to ChatGPT and asked how to get a PhD in astrophysics.
A field they knew absolutely nothing about.
Right. And ChatGPT instantly mapped out the entire pathway. It listed the high school prerequisites they needed to catch up on. It gave them the exact college courses in physics and math they should take.
It outlined the master's degree sequence.
It even generated 5 highly relevant, cutting-edge dissertation ideas for the PhD and provided a list of completely free online courses from MIT and Stanford to get started today, all in a matter of seconds.
It completely bypassed the traditional university friction. No making an appointment with an academic counselor who is booked out for 3 weeks.
No driving to campus and fighting for a parking spot.
No waiting in lines at the registrar's office. No arbitrary philosophy general requirements blocking your path to the astrophysics courses you actually want to take. It was just pure, frictionless access to knowledge based solely on the user's agency.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this deep dive right now?
Yeah, whether you are prepping for a board meeting, trying to learn a new coding language, or sitting in a formal classroom, you have to ask yourself a hard question. Are you just rushing to spit out a polished final product to appease a boss or a rubric? Or are you actually valuing the messy human process of throwing bad ideas away and wrestling with the material?
Because the polished product is no longer uniquely human. A machine can do it instantly.
We've traced a wild journey today. We started with students turning in soulless AI-sanitized essays because they were terrified of making a grammatical mistake. We looked at how Berkeley researchers tried to rewrite the rules to grade the invisible human process of learning using metacognitive logs.
And ultimately, we saw how the rise of generative AI is forcing massive historical institutions to prove they offer more value than just a transaction for an expensive credential.
If the only thing a university offers is a polished product and a hoop to jump through, well, AI does that faster, cheaper, and without the parking lot traffic.
Which leaves us in a really fascinating place. The machine can perfectly mimic the final result of our thinking. So where do we go from here?
It's the ultimate question.
It makes you wonder. If generative AI can now instantly produce the perfect, polished written product that we've spent centuries training students to create, perhaps the future of assessing human knowledge won't be written at all.
Oh, wow.
Could the rise of AI force higher education to abandon the essay entirely and return to purely oral, real-time Socratic dialogue? Imagine a world where the only way to prove you truly understand a concept is to sit across from an expert and debate it live, face-to-face, where no machine can auto-tune your thoughts.
Now that is a process you can't fake. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.